Welcome back to Only Talk Sports. We talk sports every single day, or at least we try to. I'm Roach Jeffrey. Subscribe to the channel if you like sports content. Hit that notification bell so you never miss another video. The transfer portal's been quiet for the last couple of days with a lot of big names. There have been a lot of smaller names enter the portal, but finally one of the Blue Bloods just got a big transfer portal addition. The Kansas Jayhawks have added former Towson guard Nick Timberlake. I'm going to go over everything that has to do with Nick Timberlake as a player, how much I think he can help out Kansas basketball next season, and whether Kansas is now going to be one of the top teams in the Big 12 yet again next season, or do they need to add a few more pieces in the portal? Now, looking at Nick Timberlake, he is a fantastic guard. Obviously, when you're coming from a place like Towson, you have no idea how good they're going to be able to translate that production from a smaller school to a bigger school. Towson does play in a much smaller conference than Kansas does in the Big 12. There's nowhere near the same level of competition, but Nick Timberlake did deliver at a high level where he was at. He's a 6'4", 200-pound guard, so he has great size, and while he was at Towson, he averaged 17.7 points per game, 3.9 rebounds, and 2.4 assists this past season, and he shot 45.5% from the field, 41.6% from the three-point line, and 84.5% from the free throw line. Those last two numbers are fantastic. You want to be able to have a guy that shoots at a really high level, and you also want a guy that shoots great at the free throw line to be able to give you that clutch free throw shooter at the end of games when you want to be able to pull out a win when you're in a close game overall. And Kansas basketball, there is a lot of roster flux right now with the Kansas Jayhawks, and Bill Self, he is a mastermind head coach. He's a Hall of Famer. What he has done in Lawrence, Kansas over the years in the Big 12, dominating that conference, has been impeccable, but there's a lot more competition in the Big 12 now with Baylor and Texas and some of these other teams, so Kansas has to stay on the top of their game if they want to be able to continue to be at the top of the Big 12, and they're losing two studs in Jalen Wilson and Grady Dick to the NBA draft. Both players were fantastic this past season for Kansas. Grady Dick was a lights-out freshman phenom from the three-point line, and Jalen Wilson was one of the best do-it-all players in college basketball this past season, scoring, facilitating, rebounding. He was just a fantastic player. And they're also losing former five-star recruit MJ Rice to the transfer portal. He just committed to NC State, so that's a huge loss as well, and a big game for NC State. MJ Rice was a player that definitely wants to play, and maybe he definitely could tell that he might not have been able to have guaranteed playing time next season for Kansas, so he left. So maybe that won't be the biggest loss for Kansas, but adding Nick Timberlake definitely helps ease that loss, because Nick Timberlake is a 6'4", 200-pound guard, and he fills the exact spot that Kansas desperately needs. Actually, a lot of depth and talent at that position is a little bit weak for Kansas right now. Kevin McCullough, he's mulling whether he should go pro or come back. If he returns for Kansas, that exponentially helps out their team by far, because Kevin McCullough is a great defender and he's a really good offensive player. But also, Kansas has KJ Adams coming back and DeJuan Harris. So Kansas has the point guard position figured out. DeJuan Harris is a fantastic point guard. He is a bit undersized, but he has a lot of heart, and he hustled at a high level for Kansas this past season, and him getting hurt in the NCAA tournament really hurt Kansas in that game against Arkansas. He was banged up, but he'll be back next season playing at a high level, facilitating to the rest of the Jayhawks roster. And also, Kansas has a star freshman class coming in with Elmarco Jackson. He's a five-star recruit, and they have Chris Johnson, Marcus Adams Jr., and Jamar McDowell all coming in for Bill Self and company. And looking at the Kansas Jayhawks, are they going to be a team that's now the best team in the Big 12 next season? I don't think that is a guarantee right now, because even though you have the proven point guard DeJuan Harris, and you also have some really good players coming in the freshman class that are all really solid and could contribute at a high level this next season, college basketball is now being dictated by experience. You cannot just rely on freshmen like you used to. Kentucky and Duke are really struggling with that when their team is so loaded with freshmen and they don't have a lot of experience. But I do think if Kansas can get Kevin McCullough back, that will definitely help out in the experience department. But Nick Timberlake is an older guard. He's been at Towson for a few seasons, and I think that's where he really comes into play, because he's a guy that is a good connector piece. He's not going to come in and be able to replace what Jalen Wilson did this past season for Kansas. He's not going to be able to average nowhere near what Jalen Wilson did, and probably not even average the 17 points per game he did at Towson. But if he can come into Kansas and average around 11 to 13 points per game, somewhere in that neighborhood, and shoot around 40% from three yet again for the Kansas Jayhawks. Yes, the transition will be tough, and some players don't transition from a smaller conference to a bigger school very well, but you do have some good success stories with it. You look at someone like Tyson Walker, transfer from Northeastern to Michigan State. He's had some success the past couple of seasons for the Spartans. I think if Nick Timberlake can come in and be a really solid two-guard for the Kansas Jayhawks next season and shoot the three ball at a high level and be able to defend at a respectable rate in the Big 12, it will be a tough jump for Nick Timberlake, but you could tell a lot of other programs wanted him. UConn and and the North Carolina Tar Heels also wanted Nick Timberlake. You think about UConn, they just won the national title. Dan Hurley had tons to sell to Nick Timberlake, and they're losing Jordan Hawkins and some of their other players, so that definitely was a place that Nick Timberlake could have gone to. And Towson is more in the northeast part of the country, so UConn would have been a great fit for him, I think, there. And North Carolina, they're a team that's actually really struggling right now, and they need to be able to replace the production that Caleb Love is leaving from the North Carolina Tar Heels. And yes, they brought in a couple of transfer guards overall, but I don't think that they're starting level guards. So Nick Timberlake could have went there, and North Carolina's a blue blood. UConn is becoming a blue blood. But the fact that Nick Timberlake went to Kansas shows you that Kansas is still at the top of college basketball. They're still at the top of the Big 12, even though there's a lot more competition than there was before. And Bill Self is still doing an unbelievable job with the Kansas Jayhawks. But it's Kansas now the top team in the Big 12 and a top 15 to top 10 team in college basketball for next season. I don't know if they're there yet. I think they need a little bit more. But if you look at Kansas, I don't think they're done in the transfer portal. They're looking at a guy like Harrison Ingram in the portal, who's also being recruited by so many other teams in college basketball as well. Maybe he can come in and play the 3 spot for Kansas next season, have Nick Timberlake at the 2. We have no idea what Kansas is going to be able to do. I don't know if they're going to be able to land Harrison Ingram, but judging by what Bill Self just did with Nick Timberlake, he can get almost any player that he wants to be able to get. If a player wants to succeed at a high level, Kansas also has a great NIL operation, and you're playing for a Hall of Famer in Bill Self. There's not a whole lot else you can ask for going to a college in college basketball. Being able to set yourself up for a lot of success in college basketball, have a lot of money financially with NIL, and have the potential to be able to go to the next level because Kansas gets so many players to the NBA. I think this is a win-win for Kansas and Nick Timberlake. This is a huge addition for Kansas, and Nick Timberlake, I think, will have a lot of success with Kansas next year. I do think that Kansas, if they want to reach their maximum potential next year and potentially be a national title contender yet again, like they usually are, and potentially a team that will be the guaranteed favorite to win the Big 12 next season, because right now that's a little murky. Maybe they still clearly aren't the best team in the Big 12 for next year. I think they're going to need to get another transfer or two, but there's still a lot of players in the portal available. They're looking at Hunter Dickinson as well. I don't think Kansas is nowhere near done, but Nick Timberlake gets the ball rolling down the road. I think Nick Timberlake is a huge addition. He's a really big guard. He has great size. He has a lot of confidence, and the fact that he's willing to make this jump from Towson to Kansas shows that he believes in himself, and Kansas believes in him, because they would not have wanted him, and neither would UConn and North Carolina if they didn't see a lot of potential in Nick Timberlake. I think this is a fantastic addition for Kansas and Bill Self. I don't think Nick Timberlake's enough to automatically say Kansas is going to be one of the best teams in the Big 12 next season, but the trajectory is yet again going up for the Kansas Jayhawks like it usually is every offseason. Bill Self's done a fantastic job this offseason getting so many good freshmen to commit to Kansas, having that 5-star recruit now Marco Jackson and the other 3 great freshmen as well. If he can get Kevin McCullough back, which is a really good possibility, I think McCullough definitely could come back to Kansas and spurn the NBA draft for one more season. He's got the point guard DeJuan Harris. Now you've got a great shooting guard in Nick Timberlake that shoots the 3 ball at a high level to be able to replace what you're losing with Grady Dick with the 3-point shooting production. You still don't have a player to replace Jalen Wilson, but if you can get a solid player at the 3, I think Kansas will be in great shape. I'm sure Bill Self has everything under control. Getting Nick Timberlake is huge, and I think this sets up Kansas to potentially be a really solid team next season. They might need a little bit more to be a national title contender and the best team in the Big 12 next season, but Nick Timberlake is a fantastic addition to keep him away from UConn and North Carolina, and I think Nick Timberlake will have a lot of success with the Kansas Jayhawks next season. And Kansas basketball with Bill Self is still showing why they're one of the top teams in college basketball, being able to get great players like Nick Timberlake year in and year out. Subscribe to the channel if you like sports content. Like this video down below. Comment down below what you think about Nick Timberlake transferring to Kansas and not going to UConn and North Carolina and some of the other schools that were looking at him, and whether you think this will make Kansas a really good basketball team next season, and whether you think they need a bit more to be a national title contender and the top team in the Big 12 next season. Follow me on Twitter as well. Link is in the description, and I will see you next time.